And Hester is going to run it out past the 40 into Giants territory. He is going to go all the way. Touchdown, Chicago.
Trying to find somebody open and throws an interception. And it's Charles Woodson's 55th of his career.
Dives for the touchdown, San Francisco.
I want to play desperately, and I'm going to try to drive everyone nuts till they give me a shot.
Favre threw an almost impossible 336 career interceptions.
See that?
Yeah. We have here the Brett Favre interceptions calendar.
It's the lovable kicking bear doll. And guess what? It comes with its own goalpost. Isn't that neat?
Double doink.
Football fans, welcome back to Cut the Cheese, Poke the Bear, Roast the Niner. We are rolling up on the end of the 2024 regular season in the NFL. We've got Gold Rush, we've got Lord Uther, and we've got me, Urza Master, with you today. Thanks for joining us again. And we've got some pretty late December-y action going on in the NFL. We've got all of our teams in recent action here to varying degrees of unsuccess. I want to kick it over to Lord Uther because a Bears update is always a great way to start off because you can cleanse your palate. Lord Uther, give us a little insight here. How are your Bears doing?
To quote one of the greatest morning disc jockeys in Chicago history, Jonathan Brandmeier, the Bears still suck. So I know some of you might be caught off guard by this, but when you lose 6-3 and you talk about bringing Pete Carroll in to run your organization or to be the next coach when the guy is 73 years old, you have no vision. You're desperate. It's obvious that that's the case. And then I continue to go back and think about all the coaches that we've brought in beforehand, and you wonder why this organization is just a mess. And I think this is true for a lot of GMs. They think they can outthink the system and find that diamond in the rough that suddenly is going to be this, oh, no one knew, but I knew, ha, 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 gotcha. Why are you not going after coaches that have been part of successful coaching trees? That's what I would like to know. I mean, that's someone who I would like to bring in. So right now, the talk here is obviously handing this entire thing over to the offensive coordinator from the Lions. I believe is that Ben Olsen? I believe that's who that is.
Ben Johnson.
Is it Ben Johnson? Okay.
So.
A guy from Detroit. That's all I know, my friends. I just know Chicago and Mike Tomczak and Jim McMahon. But anyway, and Dick. So we're talking about bringing this guy in, and I think bringing someone a little more offensive-minded in does make sense. I also think that you've got to give a coach a few years to make things happen. I don't know, I know they tried that with Eberflus, though I don't think he was the original solution to begin with. But, hopefully if there's some patience there and they bring in someone that's a little more offensive-minded, then maybe this guy's able to make some decisions about offensive linemen and put us in a few more successful situations, because this team has just given up. It's over. We're going to go to Green Bay. They're absolutely going to shellac us. Here's the only win, in my opinion, that can happen this season. If Caleb Williams exits this season not having his eyes down the entire time waiting to be sacked, and can actually somehow carry himself into the next season, not hurt, which I can't believe the dude hasn't been hurt this year, not shell-shocked, not looking over his shoulder, if he can end the season that way and go into the next season feeling like that, that's going to be a huge win. Because I think a lot of quarterbacks, especially rookie quarterbacks, which for some reason now too I'm trying to figure out why we expect these guys to just step on the field and be successful right off the bat. I think it takes some time to grow into that spot. You're a rookie. So my hope is that this guy doesn't end the season with an awful attitude or being shell-shocked. Because it could get to the point that he doesn't want to be a part of this organization in a few years, and now what? Now what are you going to do?
Back to square one.
So with all that being said, we're awful. And I was watching Mike Tomczak videos today. Actually, it was the Fog Bowl that they were showing, where Dick went against Buddy Ryan and Mike Tomczak was out there, which now I got to figure out that situation because they brought McMahon in off the bench. And I don't know why McMahon was on the bench. I don't know if he had been injured at some point. Anyway, I digress. God help us, please. Happy New Year. That's all I have to say about that.
I don't know how much control they Ben Johnson's people or Pete Carroll's people or anything wants in there. I, as an NFL fan, as a lifelong 49er fan and so forth, I always thought that what you needed is a strong organizational GM, somebody who knows free agency, who knows the salary cap, who knows drafting, scouting, all of those, contract renegotiations and deferred money here and, all of that. I think you need someone that's their lane, and it's a big portfolio, but that's what they're focused on 24/7, allowing a young, excitable X's and O's guy who's got all these great ideas for motions and eye candy at the line of scrimmage and, defensive coordinators who, have their players get after it. I don't like the Bill Parcells model, where you give him complete control, or if that was what Pete Carroll was doing in Seattle. I think you need a GM that has, like Uther says, has been around winning organizations and knows what winning looks like, but stays in their lane, just like you want the team owner, Jerry Jones, looking at you, like you want him to stay in his lane and just write the checks, sit in the owner's box, and date somebody 40 years their junior. And then you want a coach. Like Ben Johnson could be a fantastic head coach. He could also be a terrible head coach. But you want somebody who's young and enthusiastic and will work the job 23 hours a day and so forth, and he's never heard of his wife and kids. But I don't want the complete package. I don't want somebody like I think what Bill Belichick may have been, his people might have wanted. I want, GM responsibilities, roster, all that. I think you need two separate lanes. The 49ers, this season notwithstanding, they seem to have a pretty good, John Lynch as a GM has kept a culture, for the most part, that what the expectations are. Kyle Shanahan gets to, quote, be the wizard of the X's and O's. I think, much like you, I don't think there's any difference between how the Bears are going to end up and how the 49ers have played this year. Not from, again, a talent standpoint or so forth, but just not meeting the fan bases where they needed to be. I think 3 or 4 years of just relentless get to the playoffs, get to the NFC title game, get to the Super Bowl, and not walking away with that trophy and the confetti. I think that ultimately just wears on athletes. Like I think it happened to the Rams. I think it happens to most teams who lose the Super Bowl. It's just such a grind, and you've got the additional injuries, and you've got there were family tragedies for players. There were at least 2 players who had like infant children or young children perish during the season, and they had to take several weeks to it was a lot, and that's no excuse. The Niners have played dreadful since the bye, since the break. They went into the bye and they were right around 500, and it's like, all right, we're going to make a run, and that run never came. In fact, it kind of went in the opposite direction. There were, more injuries and more this and that and the other. Brock Purdy now has an elbow contusion, so he's done for 2025. They shut down Dre Greenlaw again, Trent Williams. Obviously McCaffrey was on season, injury reserve. Jordan Mason, Ricky Pearsall had a coming out party as a rookie wide receiver. He's the one who was shot in August, but has come back, and we've kind of been waiting all season for him, to see what he does, and he has flashes. He was making big catches against Detroit, and for a full half of football and a couple of drives, the 49ers, every time the Lions would go down and do something, the Niners would march right back down the field and score. It was a track meet, and then a couple of ill-timed interceptions from Brock Purdy, who apparently was playing with some nerve, not damage because they don't think it's serious, but nerve inflammation in his elbow. Made some bad, throws, and that, Detroit sealed the deal. But I mean, there's no difference between how the Bears, the Bears have lost 10 in a row, I think, which is pretty Bears-like. But we're going to end up in the same place. We're going to have a reasonably high draft pick. We're not going to be in the postseason tournament. But what I think the Bears, what you're saying, the whiff of desperation, I hope they're not just going to say, look, we'll give you whatever you want, come run our team. I just don't think that that's built on long-term success. I think, again, you look at the Green Bay model, what they're doing right now, what was successful, I think, in other organizations. It's when you don't have, one coach, one man that has to make every decision in the building. I think, he needs to worry about X's and O's and the locker room and all that. And the GM needs to be upstairs saying, all right, we're going to have the facilities are going to be upgraded and we're going to have a great draft. And I've got 3 free agents I'm going to woo. I think you have to have separate lanes to have long-term success. And I think the Bears, I'm going to be honest with you. Again, there are roster problems they need to address, obviously, the O-line and so forth. But when you have a low fan base expectation and a relatively easy strength of schedule based on underperformance the prior season, which, again, the Bears will probably have, I won't say, a cakewalk schedule. They'll still have to play tough teams, especially in the division. But they will have a schedule that's not the most punishing in the NFL next season. Like, they could be this year's Commanders, right? Everyone had zero expectations for the Commanders. And suddenly Jaden Daniels and, the new coach and some renewed effort on defense and so forth. I mean, the Commanders are a playoff team. I don't think any of us are thinking Super Bowl champs, but they'll probably give somebody a fit in the first round. And if somebody that is playing in the second round isn't careful, they could accidentally find their ways deep into a playoff run just based on their enthusiasm and hey, we can win. We know what it means to win all of a sudden. And I think the Bears could easily have a season turnaround where, you wrote them off at 4-13 and then suddenly the next season they're like 12-5. I believe that's real. And so, like I say, but it's not a snap your fingers and it's done, but they could very easily have that kind of switch. Because let's be honest, none of us thought the Commanders would be a credible playoff team in August.
No, but I'll say this. I'll take your fan frustration over my fan frustration because your fan frustration is players being injured. And I think that's completely different from ineptitude. Okay. To the point of, I mean, we supposedly have all these offensive weapons. You let Montgomery go to the Lions. You bring in DeAndre Swift. So you have all these wide receivers. Then you bring in a running back who is most effective catching passes. But you let Montgomery go. You have no one that's going to fill that role of kind of being that punishing back to set something, to set up the pass or whatever. I mean, look, we do this podcast, I just say stuff. I'm not Mr. I'm in the Maddens and I understand all this. Like, I'm just an emotional sports fan, right? It is what it is, unless you want to talk basketball. Maybe I can break that down a little bit better. But I'm not that dumb that you need that running. You see this guy go to another system and flourish. It's like this continuous problem here, and I think we keep going back to one thing too, which is the McCaskies can't be in charge, or they need to be a silent partner, kind of what you're referring to. Sign the check and stay out of it. Collect your dough, make your billions, and just that's all you need to do. Bring in some people that can do it. And I also think it's kind of misaligned to say bring in Bill Belichick or to bring in Pete Carroll. Trust me, ageism is awful. Next paragraph. You don't want them coaching at 73 years old if you're going to have a longer term plan. Bring Belichick into Dallas. I could see that. Maybe they're closer, at least the way, than we are. Maybe they have different pieces that are in place. I don't know. But bringing him in, okay, I don't know. I'm just making stuff up. Like I said, I don't know anything. Why is anyone even listening to me right now talk? Everyone's probably shut their computers off by now. Anyway, you would bring, let me back up. You probably bring a Belichick or a Pete Carroll into a place where they're closer, right? At least if they want to do the coaching as well. You don't bring them in here where we're probably 5, 6, 7 years away. I'm just making up numbers because, again, I don't know what I'm talking about. I mean, look at Kansas City. They have a chance to three-peat, allegedly, right? I mean, but they've built a winning tradition there. They have a system. They have a coach. I still don't think, yes, Mahomes is better. He's a veteran. I see a lot of great things in Caleb Williams. I think he's going to be a great quarterback if he has the right coach, right? So there's all these pieces. I also think the NFL is better when the Bears are better, when the Niners are better. Who cares if the Texans are good? People don't care. People want. We hate the Cowboys, but when they're good, it makes a great story in the NFL. People want to see that. People want to see those things.
Where,
so with all that being said, I'm just going to throw one more thing out. Yeah.
Saints, are they value added?
The Aints. I will say this, and then I'll let Urza Master maybe build on a little bit. Again, say what you want about the Packers if you're a Bears fan. That's a young team that, to me, is going in the right direction. And I would much rather be in that position. I'd rather see a young, hungry team make mistakes, get into the first round of playoffs, which we don't know. This team could flounder in the first round, or they can make a run the entire way. But I would rather take a young team like that and see what happens than continue to see the absolute horse doo-doo that I see in Chicago with people that can't make decisions. And last thing, and I kind of said this last week or the week before, people need to not go to the games. They need to do what they were starting to do to the Chicago Cubs before the Cubs were like, we better figure something out because, yes, people like coming to Wrigley Field, but all these years of losing, fans are finally sick of it. I think you're starting to see that with the Bears. I have friends that aren't even watching them anymore. I'm just like, I'm not going to turn the game on. I'm not going to go through that frustration. It's not worth it. It's not worth my time. So, anyway, Urza. Just say yes, because you know I'm right.
Yeah. I don't know how to follow that if I can steal a Lord Utherism. I think the Niners, they have the problem of age. They're too old. That's why they're getting injury prone. I don't think the problem necessarily is the coaching staff, although a coaching change might help to move towards a youth movement. I think that usually goes hand in hand. Not that the coaching staff or the GM has done a bad job. I think it's just a matter of they had their guys, they had their run. Their time is over. Christian McCaffrey needs to stop playing ball. He's like Tua Tagovailoa. They're going to get permanently hurt soon. You want to be able to walk in your 50s. I hate to say it, but prioritize your health. The game is going to recognize you long term. At this point, Christian McCaffrey especially, you've made your splash. You may even be a Hall of Famer someday with what you've done. So, no shame in walking away. And they still have, good older players who can be the leader in the locker room. But they need to bring in a lot of fresh blood, and that's not a one-year turnaround. But I would disagree with them signing big contracts and bringing in, these guys who've been there forever just because they've been there, because they know they can't draft enough people to build out their roster and freshen it up. It's going to be a couple of years rebuilding. I'm not saying they're not going to have good success. I think they'll be successful. They'll probably even be contenders. But they're not going to have that super solid, trip to the NFC Championship again and again until they can really redo their roster and do it right. And I think that just comes from time. I think they have a good hiring staff, a good scouting program in place that they'll be able to do that. They got to make those moves. And it's going to make for a lot of really good veterans hitting the market in the offseason, which is where I know the Bears are going to make their mistakes again because they are not going to make the changes they should make. They're going to grab some flash in the pan coach who may have a year, 2, 3 years of success to some extent. Whether they give them that full time or not, I don't know. They'll probably sign like a 3-year contract. They'll probably give him too much money. And they'll probably bring in a lot of these big name guys and maybe have a good first year and go, all right, the Bears are back. We were 10 wins or 9 wins, and we're on the right track in our rebuilding, and then they're going to be middling for a couple of years. That doesn't mean they're a bad team. I don't think they get the credit they deserve because they are an NFL team. You know, that automatically sets you apart from most football teams on earth. But that's not saying much when you're the Chicago Bears because you are in, I would say, arguably the best division in football, and you have been for a while. You know, I'm not saying that they're not going to be contenders again, but they're going to have a very uphill battle regardless of whatever moves they make. I do think the McCaskies are unlikely to give up their power. They are like Jerry Jones wannabes, and we've seen what Jerry's done in Dallas, and it's no more than one good year every 5, which is sad because I agree. The Bears being a good team, the Cowboys being a good team. Look, I don't want to see it happen. I love watching both of those teams lose, but having those things happen really, it's good for the league, and I like a good competitive league that, you know, offers every fan a win, you know, a big win over a rival team. I'd love to watch the Packers sweep Bears, but, you know, I get it. When we lose to a rival, it lights a fire under us. You know, losing to Minnesota last week for the Packers, look, the game really didn't mean anything to us, and to be honest with you, I think it was good that we lost because I didn't want to be a 5th seed because that probably meant we have to go play one of the teams we don't want to. Frankly, and which probably was going to be either Minnesota or Detroit because they weren't going to get a first round bye. So they're going to play, you know, the weakest seed, or they're going to play this, that, or the other. And I think we have a better shot if we play the Eagles or the Commanders, and that meant a lower seed. So the game for us, because I live in Minnesota, a lot of Minnesota fans like, I'm an owner. I like the Packers. Well, I am an owner, and I do like the Packers. And I actually like the fact that we're not going to be a 5th seed. I have always seen the Packers do better as a low-card wild card than a first-round bye or a 2nd seed team. Because we don't play well after a bye week. We just don't. Ever. I've never seen us play very well after a bye week. Even when we win after the bye week, we don't play very well. And you need a gut check. Often late in the season, a gut check is the best thing that can happen to the team. And Minnesota's a good team. They are absolutely beatable. Same thing with Detroit. Detroit very nearly lost like most of their games this year. It really does boil down to, like in the Niners game, do you make those mistakes late in the game, or do you get a lead and hold it? And you have to play to win. You can't get conservative on them because they'll exploit you. They have a great pass rush, and they have a good offense with a very steady veteran quarterback. But we all know Jared Goff is very easy to rattle if you bring enough pressure. And I think that the Packers probably have that edge if they're able to maintain it. Now, they've had some guys hurt that we should get back in the offseason. We won't have them against the Bears for sure. We should rest our starters to some extent. But, you know, we don't have a lot of depth in the secondary. So bringing up front pressure is a lot harder. We need to see more production from our D-line. And most of the year they've been getting it. The problem is, in the game against the Vikings, they were on the field too long. They got tired. We had a really good first half, all things considered. But you get tired, you're going to lose the game. It just happens. The big guys, they're big for a reason. They don't have a ton of stamina. Not to say that some of those guys don't play 80 snaps a game or more, but you have to be cognizant of the fact that your offense has to sustain drives, and being so youthful, that can be tough. We either get explosive plays, which makes for short scoring drives, or we're 3 and outs, or 6 and outs. It's very rare to sustain a long, controlled drive unless we start the game with the ball or start the half with the ball. What the Packers need to do is really attack that medium range passing offense. We have the run game. The run game works very well. When Josh Jacobs is running for 11 yards every down, yeah, we're going to sustain a drive across the field. As long as we don't penalize ourselves, we're going to do just fine. Having Elton Jenkins out against the Vikings, you could tell. It was a problem. Run game suffered. We got penalties, pre-snap fouls. I still think that, and I think a lot of the football pundits out there would agree, that they are one of the most dangerous teams in the postseason because of their youth, because of their tenacity, and because of the fact that they've already played Detroit, Minnesota this year. And they played the Eagles, and they played the Commanders, and they've done very well against all of those teams. Even though they lost to 3 of them, they've done very, very well in those games. Especially, I look at the Eagles, like, we really only lost in Brazil because of that field. And the Eagles damn near lost for the same reason. So, and the Vikings game was a blowout for 3 quarters, but it ended up very close. You give us one good quarter instead of, the second or the third quarter we had, we win that game. Detroit was very close. I think that came down to a field goal. So there's really high potential that you've got a Super Bowl team there just waiting to crack that egg. And it's hard to beat a team 3 times a year. I don't care how good you are, because that team figures you out. And so I think it's a very promising offseason. We're going to do whatever we do. I'm proud of what the Packers have done this year. I was not expecting them to do well, to be honest. I did not expect to make the playoffs. I thought our schedule was going to be relatively tough. I always come in as an optimist. I think I called them at we're going to win 14 games and be the number 1 seed. That was not what I was really thinking in my head. I'm a little more of a realist, but I put on a show for everybody here at Pending Rebrand. Subscribe, like, and share, please. But this week, to close out the regular season, we've got some really good matchups across the league, in fact, that I think are going to be surprisingly good games. I want to start with the Giants at the Eagles. It's a rivalry game. Those are always contentious, but the Giants put on a clinic in their last game. How do you guys feel about this Giants-Eagles matchup?
I think the Eagles are going to take the rest and get ready for the postseason run. And the Giants, again, put 45 on the Colts. I mean, that's really an indictment of what's going on in Indianapolis right now. It won't be a 45-point outburst, but Eagles have notoriously this season been a little sluggish in their starts. If the Giants get up 2 scores, 17-0 or so forth, and Philly's already basically in, rest mode, I very easily could see. And the Giants, let's be frank, they're a terrible football team. They're going to fire their coach. They'll probably fire their GM. They're in Bears territory right now, but they may have enough pride in a rivalry game, and the Eagles just may be disinclined enough to really give it the old NFL try. So yeah, I could see the Giants, getting on there, especially if they go up big early.
Yeah, Eagles don't impress me. I don't know why. There's just something, I feel like there's lots of openings in their armor that you can kind of get at, so they don't impress me that much. But New York is awful. I'm not a fan of the first round bye when I'm a coach. I hate it. I'm not a fan of sitting players. I think what Dan Campbell did last week was the thing that you should do, because you may just think that's 1 week off. And again, middle school athletics, pros, 2 different things. I get it. But the underlying thing, I think, remains the same, which is you think you're giving them a break. I would at least let them get in there, break a sweat, play a couple quarters, then maybe you start pulling them out after that. Because I think when you take that week or two off, or when you get that week that's a bye, I'd rather be playing a lower seed as a first round, or I mean, if I'm the highest seed, right? If I'm supposed to get a bye, I'd rather play someone anyway, because it keeps your players in game mode. And when you start sitting them, that's when you start running into some timing issues, frame of mind for a game. I think those things all play into it. I'm not a fan of sitting. But I get why sometimes they do that. I don't think it's a good idea. I hate the first round bye, when I'm a coach at least.
I agree. I dislike the bye week for the same reason. Especially when it comes late and you need to make a run. Like, I hate a late bye. I'd much rather have a week 4 bye. I know it makes for a long end of the season, but you get in better game shape much faster. Commanders at Cowboys, I think this one you could almost write off. I know it's a rivalry game, but the Cowboys are terrible. I don't think they're going to give the Commanders much trouble. Even if the Commanders choose to rest anybody, how do y'all feel about this one?
Washington.
I'll keep it quick. Washington. Yeah.
Washington. Good call. We also have a couple of interesting matchups that maybe aren't as explosive, but 49ers at Cardinals, Seahawks at Rams. I love the division late games. I'm thinking 49ers pick up a win, and I think the Rams beat the Seahawks. How do you guys feel?
I concur.
I agree with both of those as well.
All right. And then that brings us to a rivalry game that I don't know why it's a rivalry game, but the Dolphins at the Jets. Why? Why even have a game?
Yeah, I think there's so many questions. Man, that's two New York teams that are just boof. Does Rodgers come back next year? He's talking like he is. Are they giving him too much say in that organization? I don't know. And then Tua Tagovailoa, I don't want to see him get his brains rearranged, which continues to happen to this guy. But I will just say this. I hope Miami beats the Jets, because I am anti-Jets. All because of Aaron Rodgers. I hate to say it. Not a fan.
If the Jets lose, there is a better than 50% chance the organization might turn back the clock and go with Rex Ryan as their coach. And I would love to see that, just to see them.
I've been hearing a lot of that too.
Yes.
Could you imagine?
They're in free fall, and yeah, that would just be like taking a drill and going right through the center of the earth to the Earth's core if they brought Rex Ryan back in this environment and so forth. That I would be thrilled to see that. So yes, Jets, lose that game and let's see what happens.
Yeah, cut A-Rod, dump most of that team, bring in Rex Ryan. I honestly think the Jets could be good next year if they completely switch gears. I do agree. Dolphins win. The last two matchups we'll talk about, we got Bears, Packers, Vikings, Lions, NFC North, barn burners. We got Bears, Packers at noon. We got Vikings, Lions in the evening game. So I think the perfect timing of those games. Lord Uther, how are your Bears going to do?
Oh, yeah, we're going to get smoked. So, next. I wouldn't be surprised. And they're playing Caleb Williams, which, yeah. So, am I going to go against what I said earlier? But then again, they're not in a playoff run. Do I put them out there to get shellacked? I don't think so. I think I sit them, even though they're not going to. Put Bajent in there. Let him play a full game. Not like he's going to, see any time after that. So put him in there, get an even higher draft pick, because you're going to lose anyway. And let Bajent get smacked around a little bit and let Caleb Williams, keep his noggin attached to his shoulders one more week. And I think Detroit beats Minnesota.
I think, yeah, I agree with just about everything he said. I think Detroit beats Minnesota because we're in Detroit and Ford Field, and I don't think Minnesota with Sam Darnold and so forth. I know that they've been successful on, they've had road wins. I'm not saying they can't go outside of Minnesota to the land of 10,000 lakes or whatever to get a victory, but I don't think Detroit can be a scary place to play, just like Lambeau Field in January. And I don't know that the Vikings this season have shown the mettle, mettle, to be able to withstand that, especially if they get a turnover early, they turn the ball over, or they drive stalls and they are forced to kick a field goal or something. I think, whereas Detroit and the Niners, maybe going into that game, I thought the Niners had a puncher's chance and Detroit prevailed, obviously, in the second half. I think at home, on the doorstep of the playoffs, I think it's unleash those ravenous jungle beasts, and I think the Vikings are probably shredded.
I agree. I think Detroit dismantles the Vikings, and I hate to say it, but I think Sam Darnold's going to get hurt.
Well, I was going to say, real quick, do they sign him to? So there's some rumors out there that they let Darnold go, and they let Daniel Jones take this, and let McCarthy have another year to kind of, what do you think? Are they going to sign? Because supposedly Darnold, they're talking $20 million a year for him or something like that, and I don't. Do you do that, or do you let him go and you're like, we'll let Daniel Jones give this a whirl because McCarthy's going to step in after that?
I think knowing the Vikings as well as I do, I think they screwed up no matter what they do. I don't think either option is good. They have 6 quarterbacks on their roster, I think, right now, between the active roster and the practice squad, and they're all bad. Not a single one of them is any good. Even the rookie guy that they brought in that got hurt or whatever.
Jake McCarthy.
Yeah, I don't think any of them are any good, quite frankly. Sam Darnold is a steady quarterback who can play well enough. I think the smartest move of all the quarterbacks on the roster would be to keep Sam Darnold. I do not think the ownership wants to pay him the money he deserves. And I do think it's going to come down to that because I think there are a lot of teams who need a quarterback in the league that would gladly pay him even more than that to come play for them. And he would probably do well there too. I think he's enjoying his time in Minnesota, but I don't think he's a franchise quarterback. I don't think he cares to be. And at this point in his career, if somebody's going to pay him a bunch of money for the next 5 years, he's not going to turn it down. So Minnesota's going to have to either put up or shut up on that one. I have a feeling they're not going to, and they're going to go with one of the other 5 people they have, because they have a couple of guys with some tenure. I could see Daniel Jones being the guy. Horrible move. I like Daniel Jones as a person, but he is not a good quarterback. McCarthy, I think, would be good if he could get the Jordan Love treatment and sit behind a Sam Darnold for 2 or 3 years. I don't think Minnesota, unless they win a Super Bowl, I don't think they bring him back. Especially if they lose to Detroit this week, and especially if they lose in the playoffs early, I don't think they bring him back. I don't think they want to piss away that much money. I also think Aaron Jones is probably going to get dealt, because I don't think they want to pay him. And I think Aaron Jones is going to be ill-prepared for that outcome. Packers-Bears, I hate to say it, but I think the Bears are going to do reasonably well. I think we beat them. I don't think it's a close game, but I think it's closer than anybody wants it to be because we're going to rest a lot of guys, especially the guys who we're a little worried about. I think Jordan Love's going to play most of the game. If we get up by 2 scores, they're going to put Malik in. Malik could win the game easily, even if he started. I don't want to see that because I want to see game mode stay turned on. And I think we're going to need those reps for our guys. But what I want to see is our secondary to be on its A game. I would even go so far as to say it might be a good time before that Bears game to look for a veteran corner out there sitting on the couch who we could bring in for this game against the Bears. There's still a little time. And have him get some reps out in the secondary against Caleb Williams, who is not a bad quarterback. But it would give him some reps, and we would need the depth going into the postseason.
I'm sorry, but the question of the year is, how is Minnesota 14-2 with this roster? Like, I'm looking at their roster. Besides Justin Jefferson, I don't. It must have been the coaching. I mean, I know I don't really watch enough Minnesota games, but it's got to be the coaching and the system. If Sam Darnold was doing what he did this year, and did Justin Jefferson break Jerry Rice's record or something for? Was it receiving yards? Was he up for something like that?
I think he has the potential to do it this week, but I don't think he's done it yet.
Yeah, I haven't seen him. Yeah.
All right, but I'm just looking at this, and I'm flabbergasted that they've
won
14-2.
a lot of very close games, one-score games, similar to Detroit. That's why I've been saying all year they're beatable. It's just teams they've played, because we've had soft schedules, teams they've played have not been able to seal the deal or have made late mistakes. Packers included, by the way. And I think that's what's going to be the biggest shock for both those teams in the postseason is now they're going to play really strong teams. And, I know every Vikings fan out there is going to say, well, look at what the Packers did when they played the Vikings both times. No. The Packers didn't have much to play for last week. And, yeah, they played, but I don't think that team makes that many mistakes. And Matt LaFleur is not that animated on the sideline over every little oopsie without there being some measure of, I'm not going to say throwing the game, but some measure of this game doesn't mean that much to me, and I want to play a little possum when I meet them in the postseason. I'm not saying that's the case, but if I were Matt LaFleur and I was having one of them locker room chats that people aren't able to be in with, that's what I'm telling him. We're going to make it look like we're inept. And then we're going to have a monster comeback to give them a little taste, but it's probably better for us to not win this game. With that, football fans, this is the close of the 2024 season. We are in 2025. Happy New Year to all of you. We will be here throughout the postseason, through the Super Bowl, and we'll pick up with you again next NFL season. But, as always, as every week, we are ready for more football. Are you ready for more football?